This video is about Israel's independence and the war that changed the nation. Subscribe for more. The year was 1947 and the air in Jerusalem was thick with anticipation and tension. The city, a crossroads of three major religions, stood as a symbol of both hope and conflict. The streets were alive with voices, some whispered in excitement, others echoed with fear. Amidst this turbulent atmosphere, a group of determined men and women gathered, their hearts beating in unison for a cause that would reshape the history of a nation. David Ben-Gurion, the charismatic leader of the Jewish Agency, stood at the center of the crowded room where discussions had turned into heated debates. The flickering light from a nearby oil lamp cast shadows over his rugged face, revealing the weight of leadership on his shoulders. He was a man forged in struggle, shaped by the horrors of the Holocaust, which had claimed the lives of millions, including many of his own family. Yet, in that moment, Ben-Gurion's mind was not just on the past, it was on the future. "A gentleman," he declared, his voice steady yet impassioned, "this is our moment. The United Nations has proposed a partition plan that would create a Jewish state alongside an Arab state. It is our opportunity to reclaim our homeland after centuries of persecution." His words ignited a flicker of hope in the eyes of the room's occupants, yet the shadows of doubt loomed large. Across the table sat Moshe Dayan, a seasoned warrior whose eye patch told tales of bravery on the battlefield. Dayan's brow furrowed as he considered the implications of the plan. "And what of our neighbors?" he questioned, his voice carrying a weight of caution. "The Arab nations will not accept our presence. The moment we declare independence, we will face war on all fronts. Are we ready to defend ourselves?" The murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Outside, in the streets, Arabs and Jews lived in a delicate balance, the specter of violence hovering over them like a storm cloud. Just the day before, clashes had erupted in Haifa, leaving both sides bloodied and enraged. Fear had become an unwelcome companion, gripping the hearts of many. Ben-Gurion's gaze shifted to a young woman resolutely observing the men around her. Golda Meir, the future Prime Minister of Israel, had a fire in her spirit that was hard to ignore. "What we need is unity," she interjected, her voice strong and clear. "If we are divided, we will fall. We must gather our strength and prepare, not just for the declaration, but for the inevitable battles that will follow." The room fell silent, and Ben-Gurion nodded, appreciating her resolve. But as they strategized, the clock ticked on, and the reality of their situation pressed down on them like a heavy shroud. The United States, their most significant ally, had shown support for the creation of a Jewish state, yet their commitment was ambiguous. Meanwhile, the leaders of the Arab states were already strategizing their resistance, fueled by a sense of betrayal at the prospect of a Jewish homeland in what they considered their land. As the meeting concluded, Ben-Gurion turned to Dayan. "We must also ensure that our people are equipped and prepared. We need arms and we need allies. If the war comes, we cannot afford to face it unprepared." Dayan nodded in agreement, his mind racing with thoughts of recruiting skilled fighters and gathering weapons from sympathetic countries. In the coming months, the tension in Jerusalem escalated. The iron curtain of a looming conflict grew thicker with every passing day. The streets became rife with uncertainty as both Arabs and Jews braced themselves for the impending clash. The people of Israel, many of whom had fled war-torn Europe, could feel the shadows of their past creeping back into their lives. Simultaneously, on the other side of the wall, in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., President Harry Truman weighed the implications of the partition plan. He was a man of conviction, having witnessed the suffering wrought by the Nazis in Europe. Yet, he faced opposition from powerful oil interests and influential political figures who favored Arab nations. Truman's heart tugged at the thought of supporting a Jewish homeland, but he also knew that the United States had to maintain its strategic alliances in the Middle East. "President," a trusted aide urged, "supporting the creation of Israel could alienate our Arab allies. We risk losing influence in the region." Truman leaned back in his chair, contemplating the weight of history. "And what about the moral obligation to the Jewish people? We cannot turn our backs on them after what they've endured," he replied, his voice resolute. Back in Jerusalem, the Jewish community prepared for what felt inevitable. They began organizing militias, gathering arms from various sources, often through clandestine channels. The Haganah, the main military organization, transformed from a defensive group into an offensive force. Men and women alike enlisted, driven by the dream of a free and independent Jewish state. Among them was a young fighter named Eli Cohen, who had arrived in Israel after escaping the horrors of war. Cohen had witnessed the atrocities of war firsthand, and with every step he took toward the front lines, he carried the result to ensure that such horrors would never befall his people again. He trained rigorously, knowing that the battles ahead would not just be for land, but for existence. As the days turned into weeks, the United Nations partition plan was officially adopted on November 29, 1947. The news spread like wildfire, igniting hopes and fears alike. In the Jewish neighborhoods of Tel Aviv, celebrations erupted, with shouts of joy ringing through the streets. But in the Arab sectors, the response was one of outrage and despair. The Declaration of Independence loomed closer, and so did the threat of war. The night before the planned declaration, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. In a dimly lit room in Tel Aviv, Ben-Gurion and his closest advisors gathered once more. "Tomorrow, we will declare our independence," he stated firmly, "but we must do so knowing that we stand on the brink of a war that could define us." As they raised their glasses in a toast, the sound of a siren wailed in the distance, an eerie harbinger of the violence that would soon engulf the region. Outside, the shadows lengthened, closing in as darkness fell over the city. Each man and woman in that room understood that tomorrow would not just mark the birth of a nation, but the beginning of a relentless struggle for survival. The clock struck midnight, and the tension crackled in the air. The world was about to witness the emergence of a nation born from fire and fury, shaped by the blood of its people. As the darkness deepened, Ben-Gurion looked into the faces around him, ready to embrace the uncertainty of the dawn that would bring both hope and conflict. The next morning, a new chapter in history was set to unfold, one that would irrevocably alter the course of the Middle East and reverberate across continents. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, the stage was set. The question lingered ominously: would Israel rise from the ashes of war, or would it be consumed by the very fires it sought to escape? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be discovered in the turmoil of the coming days. As the sun rose over a land poised for battle, a new hero would emerge, and a history filled with valor, sacrifice, and an unyielding spirit would begin to unravel. The stage was set for a war that would change a nation forever. As dawn broke over the rugged hills of Jerusalem, the air hummed with an electric tension. The streets were already alive, filled with the voices of those preparing for the momentous day ahead. Every shopkeeper, every child, and every elder seemed to sense the weight of history pressing down upon them. The streets of Tel Aviv echoed with the sounds of laughter intermingled with whispers of dread. Men and women alike were busy gathering in groups, sharing the news, and discussing the implications of the declaration that they all knew was imminent. In a small enclave of Tel Aviv, Eli Cohen prepared for the day that would change everything. Dressed in his Haganah uniform, a sense of purpose burned in his chest. Above all else, he understood that the fight was not merely for a piece of land, but for the right to exist without fear. His comrades, like him, were filled with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. They were about to embark on a journey that would lead them into the heart of chaos. News of the declaration had spread, and the atmosphere crackled with uncertainty. Young men and women gathered in makeshift assembly points, discussing strategies and sharing their hopes. Lee, who had seen the devastation of war, felt the heavy burden of responsibility. He had trained for months, but the thought of actual combat sent chills down his spine. Would he be able to protect his people? Could he face the advancing armies of Arab nations that were preparing to descend upon them? Meanwhile, across the Jordan River in Amman, King Abdullah of Transjordan was holding a council with his military advisors. The news of the impending declaration had reached him like a thunderclap. He surveyed the faces of his commanders, calculating the potential consequences. "This is a direct affront to us," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "We cannot allow a Jewish state to exist in the heart of Arab lands." The room erupted in a frenzy of tactical discussions. Plans were hastily drawn up, their objective clear: to march into Palestine and establish control over the territory they considered rightfully theirs. The Arab League was coalescing, ready to confront what they viewed as a colonial imposition. The clock was ticking, and the leaders of the Arab nations were resolute war was imminent. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden hue over the city, Ben-Gurion stood on the balcony of the Tel Aviv Museum where the Declaration of Independence was to take place. The gathered crowd swelled beneath him, a sea of faces filled with hope and hesitation. He surveyed the scene, noticing the tension in the air, the whispers that carried promises of conflict. In that moment, he understood that this was the culmination of a dream forged through centuries of suffering. The time had come. Ben-Gurion's heart raced as he spoke into the microphone, his voice echoing across the crowd. "We, the Jewish people, hereby declare the establishment of the Jewish state in the land of Israel." The roar erupted from the crowd, intensified by the voices of those who had long awaited this moment. Yet, in that very instant, the drums of war began to beat. Gunfire erupted in the distance, a harsh reminder of the hostilities that had been brewing. In the streets of Jerusalem, the Haganah fighters sprang into action. Lee and his fellow soldiers raced to respond, adrenaline surging through their veins. They were not merely defending a declaration, they were standing guard over their lives and futures. As they navigated the narrow, winding streets, the sounds of chaos erupted. Arab militias had taken to the streets, and the clash of gunfire rang out like a twisted symphony of war. "Hold the line," Lee shouted, his voice authoritative amidst the chaos. He positioned himself behind a barricade, watching as the first waves of adversaries charged forward. The clarity of their purpose gave him strength. They were fighting for the very essence of their identity, a battle that transcended personal fears. As they exchanged fire, Lee's heart raced. He was no longer just a young man with dreams, he was a soldier embroiled in the fight for homeland. Each shot felt like a call to be braver, to face a destiny forged in blood. The streets were painted with the struggle of his people, and as he ducked to avoid incoming fire, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. While the battle raged across the Atlantic, President Truman faced mounting pressure in the Oval Office. Inside the walls of power, advisors debated the consequences of his support for the new state. "If we back Israel, we risk alienating our Arab allies," one of his advisors cautioned, eyes narrowed with concern. "We cannot afford to lose their goodwill." Truman leaned back in his chair, wrestling with the conflicting duties of leadership. The echoes of his visit to a liberation camp in Europe resounded in his mind. He had seen the consequences of hatred firsthand, the destruction that had been wrought. "We have a moral obligation," he asserted, his voice steady. "Israel cannot stand alone. We must support them as they claim their right to exist." Meanwhile, the chaos in Israel escalated. The sounds of airstrikes and artillery filled the air, the din of war growing louder with each passing hour. The Jewish forces, though outnumbered, fought with a fervor that surprised their opponents. Ali and his comrades were relentless, pushing back against the tide of adversaries that threatened to overwhelm them. Each day brought new challenges. They faced not just the enemy's might, but also the harsh realities of war, the loss of friends, the haunting memories of those who had fallen. In the darkened alleys of Jerusalem, a clandestine meeting was taking place. As the smoke of battle swelled outside, Ben-Gurion and his advisors strategized their next moves. "We must strengthen our alliances," Ben-Gurion said, his voice a steady anchor amidst the storm. "We need arms and support from those sympathetic to our cause. Though we must reach out to the United States and Europe," Golda suggested, fierce resolve igniting her words. "If we can show them our determination, they may be moved to assist us." The group nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. Allies were vital. They needed to showcase their will to defend their land. As the meeting adjourned, Lee returned to the battlefield, his body weary but his spirit unyielding. With each firefight, he witnessed the bravery of his fellow soldiers and the unbreakable bond formed in the crucible of conflict. They fought not just for territory, but for a legacy that would echo through generations. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. As the day turned into night, Lee knew that despite the uncertainty, they had ignited a flame of hope. The struggle was far from over, but one thing was certain: they would not surrender. The battle for survival had begun, and the world watched closely, eyes fixed on the small nation rising from the ashes of war. What lay ahead was unknown, but one thing was clear: the fight for Israel would resonate throughout history, echoing in the hearts of those who dared to dream of freedom. As Lee stood firm, the uncertainty loomed, drawing him into the depths of the struggle that would alter the course of a nation and redefine the landscape of the Middle East. As the first stars flickered into existence, a chilling resolve settled over both the defenders and their adversaries. The hourglass of history was turning, and the fate of a homeland was hanging in the balance. With war ignited and alliances strained, would the dream of a nation emerge victorious, or would the flames consume everything they had fought for? As the darkness wrapped around them, the answer remained shrouded in the fog of conflict, waiting to be revealed in the coming days. The sun rose again over the scorched earth of a nation in turmoil, casting a golden hue across the blood-soaked streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. The remnants of the previous night's skirmish lay scattered, a grim testament to the brutal reality of war. For Eli Cohen and his fellow soldiers, each dawn brought with it the weight of memories, friends lost, dreams shattered, and the relentless struggle for survival. The air was charged with the scent of gunpowder and desperation, mingling with the sweet, fleeting hope that they had fought for the day before. In the makeshift barracks, Elias' hand shook as he prepared his gear. He glanced around at the faces of his comrades, each etched with determination and fear. They were young men and women, casting aside the innocence of their youth for the harsh lessons of combat. Lee took a breath, grounding himself in the reality of their mission. They were fighting not just for a territory, but for a legacy and existence that had been denied for far too long. The call to arms echoed through the cramped quarters, and the fighters marched out, their hearts pounding to the rhythm of war. As they lined up, Lee felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. They knew that the battle would not end with the morning light. It was only the beginning. Across the city, where it had spread of the Declaration of Independence, and with it, the resolve of the Arab nations to retaliate had only intensified. Meanwhile, in the halls of power in Washington, President Truman faced renewed scrutiny. The news from the battlefront arrived like a storm, shaking the foundations of his administration. Advisors argued fiercely, the tension palpable. "President, we need to reconsider our stance," one implored. "If we continue to support Israel, we might lose vital alliances in the Middle East." Truman's mind raced. He could hear the words of the survivors from the concentration camps, their stories a haunting call to action. "We cannot abandon Israel in its moment of need," he countered, his voice steady. "The implications of our support reach far beyond this conflict. It is about humanity, about standing against oppression. We must act." While Truman grappled with the complexities of international diplomacy, the reality on the ground in Israel grew increasingly dire. Arab forces were mobilizing, and the call for jihad echoed across the region. King Abdullah of Transjordan knew the time to act was now. "We will strike decisively," he declared to his commanders, a fierce glint in his eyes. "We cannot allow this state to exist. The forces of Islam must unite to reclaim what is ours." The Arab League's response was swift and resolute. Troops poured into Palestine from Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, each soldier fueled by a combination of nationalism and religious fervor, ready to reclaim the land they viewed as rightfully theirs. As the sun set on the horizon, the stage was set for an all-out assault. Back in Tel Aviv, Ali and his unit prepared for the inevitable clash. As they strategized their defense, Lee recalled the stories of his ancestors who had fought through centuries of oppression. "We must hold this ground for our people," Ali urged, his voice ringing with conviction. His comrades nodded, inspired by his unwavering spirit. They gathered their weapons, fortified the barricades, and readied themselves for the storm that was about to hit. An eerie calm fell over the city as dusk approached, a silence that belied the chaos to come. Families huddled in their homes, some praying for protection, others filled with a desperate hope that the conflict would soon subside. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the anticipation of violence. Suddenly, the silence shattered. An explosion rocked the streets, sending debris flying and cries of alarm echoing into the night. Lee sprang into action, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Move, move!" he shouted, rallying his comrades as they rushed towards the sound of chaos. The Arab forces had launched their assault, and this was the moment they had all prepared for. As bullets whizzed past him, Lee ducked behind a crumbling wall, his heart racing. He could see the enemy advancing, a relentless tide of soldiers determined to push forward. The Haganah fighters met them head-on, their resolve hardening with each step. Lee's thoughts raced as he reloaded his weapon, his determination ignited. This was a fight for survival, a fight for the very existence of their people. The battle raged on, an unforgiving symphony of gunfire and cries of anguish. Lee fought fiercely, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. He noticed a comrade fall, struck by enemy fire, and a surge of anger filled him. He fought not just for the land, but for the brothers and sisters standing beside him, for the dreams they all shared. The night was filled with horror and heroism, but through it all, Lee remained steadfast, embodying the spirit of a nation unwilling to back down. The hours ticked by, and with each passing moment, they pushed back against the tide of invaders. Yet the odds were stacked against them, and Lee felt the weight of exhaustion creeping in. Somewhere amidst the chaos, he spotted a group of Arab soldiers breaching their defenses. Lee's heart pounded as he rallied his unit. "We cannot let them through. Hold the line. We fight for our home." The words ignited a fire within his comrades, and they surged forward, a united front against the encroaching threat. As dawn approached, the first light of day illuminated the battlefield, revealing the full extent of the struggle. Bodies lay strewn across the ground, a heartbreaking testament to the cost of freedom. Lee could see the resolve in the eyes of those who remained standing. They would not be broken. As the sun rose higher, a renewed sense of purpose filled the air. In the command tents, Ben-Gurion and his advisors contemplated their next move. "We need to appeal to the international community," Golda Meir insisted, her voice filled with urgency. We must show them that we are fighting not just for ourselves, but for the values of democracy and freedom." Ben-Gurion nodded, understanding the importance of garnering support. "Our story must be heard, and the world cannot turn a blind eye to our struggle." As they prepared their message, the battle continued to rage outside. Ali and his fellow soldiers, now weary but unyielding, began to make headway against the enemy forces. Each victory felt hard-won, a testament to their determination and unity. Yet the reality of war remained grim, and the losses they had suffered weighed heavily on their hearts. The days turned into a grueling test of endurance, with each skirmish revealing the unrelenting nature of their fight. News from the front lines traveled fast, both despairing and hopeful. International attention was drawn to the conflict, and voices of support began to emerge from unexpected places. As he fought on, he could sense that the tides were slowly shifting. Friends he had lost lived on in his heart, fueling his determination. The very essence of his struggle resonated beyond the battlefield. It had become a symbol of defiance against oppression, a testament to their right to exist. But just as a flicker of hope ignited within him, a chilling realization set in. The conflict was far from over. The eyes of the world were upon them, and the outcome was uncertain. Caught between the battle that seemed endless and the hope of a brighter future, Ali understood that the fight was more than physical. It was a war for the soul of a nation. As the sun dipped below the horizon once again, Ali stood at the edge of the battlefield, breathless and resolute. He clenched his fists, knowing that the darkest days lay ahead. The war for Israel was only beginning, and the sacrifice made would echo through time. With the weight of history on his shoulders, Ali gazed into the fading light, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. The world was watching, and the fight for survival would not only define a nation but reshape the very landscape of the Middle East. The final act of their struggle loomed just beyond the horizon, waiting to unfold in a crescendo of courage and conviction. Would the dream of a homeland emerge victorious, or would the flames of conflict consume everything they had ever fought for? The answer lay just beyond the darkness, waiting to be revealed in the tumultuous days to come. As the horizon blazed with the first light of dawn, Ali Cohen surveyed the battlefield before him. The night had been long and harrowing, the echoes of gunfire still resonating in his mind. But this new day brought with it the fierce determination. With each breath, he felt the spirit of those who had fought and fallen alongside him, a testament to their shared dream of freedom. In the command tent, Ben-Gurion and his advisors strategized as reports flooded in from the front lines. "The Arab forces are regrouping, and their numbers are overwhelming," one officer warned, his brow creased with worry. "We cannot hold the line forever." The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Ben-Gurion's shoulders. "We must fortify our positions and seek more international support," he replied, his voice resolute. "The world needs to understand that this is a fight for survival, not merely for land." Meanwhile, Ali's unit prepared to repel yet another wave of attacks. The clashes had become a brutal exchange of fire, with no end in sight. As he loaded his weapon, the resolve of his comrades surged around him, a collective heartbeat echoing in the chaos. "Remember why we fight," Ali shouted, igniting a fire within them. "We fight for our families, for our future. This land is ours." The fierce cries of affirmation rose above the din, solidifying their commitment to defend their homeland. The Arab forces, fueled by their leaders' fervor and the backing of neighboring states, continued to press on, determined to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. In Cairo, the leaders of the Arab League convened, plotting their next move. "This is not just about territory, it is about honor and faith," declared one influential figure. "We must crush this nascent state before it can solidify its existence." With renewed vigor, they sent reinforcements to the front lines, escalating the conflict into an all-out war. Back in the field, Ali and his comrades faced the relentless onslaught. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of smoke. As they fought side by side, memories of their loved ones pushed them onward. Every moment was a clash of individual hope against the overwhelming tide of despair. Ali felt the weight of each fallen soldier, a friend, a brother, a fellow dreamer. The battle was not just a test of strength, it was a war for the very essence of their identity. In the halls of Washington, President Truman faced mounting pressure. The reality of war echoed in the corridors, and the stakes had never been higher. "President, our military analysts predict a catastrophic outcome if we do not take immediate action," one advisor implored. "We must consider sending military aid to Israel, or we risk losing them entirely." Truman's heart weighed heavily with the moral implications of his decisions. "The Jewish people have suffered enough," he proclaimed, his voice unwavering. "We cannot turn our backs on their fight for survival. We will support them." As rumors of American support spread, hope ignited among the Israeli defenders. They had fought valiantly, but the reality of their situation grew more precarious by the day. The LES unit received word that supplies would soon arrive. "We can hold the line a little longer," Ali told his team, determination flickering in his eyes. "We are not alone in this fight." The tides of the battle shifted as reinforcements and supplies began to trickle in. With renewed strength, Ali and his comrades launched a counteroffensive, pushing back against the enemy forces. The ground shook with the sounds of artillery fire as they fought courageously, inching closer to reclaiming the territory they had lost. Each success was hard-won, but they felt the palpable spirit of unity rising among the defenders. The echoes of their ancestors rang in their ears, reminding them that this land had been fought for before. In the backdrop of intense combat, international attention heightened. News outlets around the world reported the conflict as it unfolded. "This is not just a territorial dispute, it is a fight for dignity and survival," one journalist proclaimed, capturing the essence of the struggle. As the world watched, the Israeli forces slowly gained ground, marking a significant turning point in the war. Yet the cost of the conflict was staggering. Lee was haunted by the faces of his fallen brothers and sisters. He had witnessed the horrors of war, the price of freedom evident in the bloodshed surrounding him. As he stood among the rubble, a renewed sense of purpose surged through him. This fight was for every individual who had ever been denied the right to exist, for every story that had been silenced. In a command tent, Ben-Gurion convened his top advisors once more. "We must leverage our recent successes to garner more international support," he insisted. "If we can show that we are unyielding, the world will have no choice but to recognize our sovereignty." The mayor nodded in agreement. "Each day we survive is a testament to our cause and our commitment to independence." The Israeli forces launched their most ambitious assault yet. "This is it, lads," Lee yelled, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We push forward, and we don't stop until we reach freedom." As they charged into the fray, the cries of their ancestors echoed in their hearts. The battles intensified, each clash a testament to their resilience, their dreams of a homeland unfolding against the backdrop of adversity. As the days bled into weeks, the tide finally began to turn in favor of the Israeli forces. News of their tenacity spread beyond the borders, and support began pouring in from unexpected allies. In Washington, Truman's administration accelerated military aid, recognizing the strategic implications of a strong Israel in the Middle East. "If Israel can stand on its own, it will change the dynamics of the region," Truman stated firmly. The battle that had once felt insurmountable now presented a path forward. Lee could feel the momentum shifting as the forces pressed harder against the enemy lines. Each victory restored a fragment of hope, rekindling their collective dream. The streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv began to fill with whispers of victory, an intoxicating blend of relief and resolve coursing through the air. The final confrontations were fierce and unrelenting. As Ali and his comrades stormed through the remaining strongholds of enemy forces, the cries of determination reverberated in the air. "For our families, for our future," they shouted, their voices harmonizing in a unison of purpose. The last remnants of the Arab forces began to retreat, and the defenders surged forward, reclaiming territory that had once been lost. Finally, after weeks of grueling conflict, Israel emerged victorious. The war that had threatened their existence had transformed into a powerful narrative of resilience and unity. The sacrifices made were not in vain. They had fought for each other and for future generations. The struggle for survival had shaped their national identity, and now they stood as a beacon of hope against the shadow of oppression. As the sun set on the horizon, Lee stood among his comrades, watching the victory unfold. The echoes of battle began to fade, replaced by the sounds of celebration. "We've done it," Lee whispered, a mix of disbelief and pride coursing through him. The dream of an independent Jewish state was now a reality, forged through the fires of conflict and sacrifice. But the journey was far from over. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges as they navigated the complexities of nation-building and international relations. The echoes of war would fade into memory, but the lessons learned would guide them as they shaped the future of their homeland. As the stars twinkled above, Lee knew that the fight for survival had birthed a nation, and with it came the responsibility to ensure that the dream of freedom continued to thrive. The world had witnessed their struggle, and now they would write their own future, one defined by resilience, hope, and an unwavering commitment to never surrender their right to exist. The flames of conflict had ignited a new legacy, and with it, the promise of peace for generations to come.